You're listening to Soundside. I'm Libby Denkman. It's election season, and all this week I'm interviewing the most competitive candidates for mayor of Seattle. The primary is August 5th. He's here to make the case to be the first sitting Seattle mayor to be reelected since 2005. Mayor Bruce Harrell is here with me now. Hi, Mayor. Welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me, Livy. I'm excited to talk with you.
So you're running for a second term that has been elusive for Seattle mayors for some time. Why should voters give you a second term?
Well, our biggest challenges, such as homelessness and housing affordability and public safety, these are challenging issues that have been in the making for a long time. And what we've done very successfully, I think we've laid the foundation, the strategies, and the investment policies to really tackle these issues aggressively. And so when you look at the data in terms of public safety or our housing investments, over $1 billion in my administration and passing a $970 million levy. When you look at what we're going to do in our education levy, that I think I very effectively, with my team, put a foundation in place to really get Seattle on the right track. And people have to realize, what the city was in, the condition it was in when I took office 3.5 years ago. And so that's why we're running for reelection. I have a great team in place. We have great momentum, and I'm up for it. This is a tough job, but I'm certainly up for it and looking forward to a second term.
So we spoke with several of your opponents about some of the issues they're running on, and the city's response to homelessness was number one for a lot of them. Their main critique, I heard again and again, was that the city has not provided enough shelter to people who are swept in homelessness encampments under your watch. How do you assess your administration's performance on homelessness?
Well, and I've heard my opponents say that, yet they don't talk about what they would do differently because we have done everything possible to address the issues, and we just have to look at the data. So in 2023, we had over 2,200 accepted shelter referrals. In 2024, we had nearly 2,000 accepted shelter referrals, and that is at the same time, we had to remove encampments from parks and from sidewalks where unfortunately people were cohabitating. And so we've had to reach that calibration between cleaning up the city, making sure it's habitable, and sheltering people. And then you look at the housing strategy. Since I've been in office, we've opened over 33 housing units, 6,500 of which were affordable. And so while, of course, this problem can't be solved overnight, and I don't think anyone else could say they can do it overnight. We have done incredible work if you just look at the data. And again, I have $343 million in our current budget, a tight budget for housing. And so our portfolio in our Office of Housing that I inherited has increased nearly 30%, 27%. So we've made remarkable progress in an issue that is extremely challenging for every major city in this country.
A lot of your opponents said they appreciate your strategy on new housing, but they are criticizing you for seeing the number of shelter beds shrink during your administration. That's according to reporting by the Seattle Times. So encampment removals going up, but total number of shelter beds in the city going down. Is that acceptable for you, Mayor, under your watch?
No, it's not acceptable, but we have to also remember that city funding shelter beds have not shrunk. We're investing in beds that, well, let me make sure everyone understands the strategy that I inherited, that I currently support. We have decided as a city to invest in a homeless strategy on a regional basis through the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. And so I have, under our administration, increased the funding to that organization. Therein, you request the support of Renton and Auburn and Kent and other cities and the county. And so thus far, we are the only city that pay into this fund. And so what they're hearing me say is that this regional approach may not be producing all of the results we want. But again, what are we doing? We've rechanged the governance board. We are putting forth a resolution to make sure that we get regional support from our colleagues. We've invested in beds that were to close under one time in federal funding. That's critical. So 66% of the shelter beds are in Seattle, and that's 85% as well of the tiny home villages. So keeping people in shelter has been a critical challenge for us, and we've met that challenge.
Let's talk about the city's budget issues. There's some bad news in the projections recently, $240 million less expected over the next 2 years. Your opponents in the race have floated a couple of ideas to make up that gap: a tax on vacant buildings, a local capital gains tax. What sort of solutions are you looking at to fill the gap, and does that include new taxes?
Sure. So the ideas that they're floating actually have come out of a commission that I commissioned to look at progressive tax policy. And I hear them floating around the notion of a vacancy tax, which on some level makes sense. It can be done councilmatically. The challenge with a vacancy tax is twofold. Number one, it doesn't produce that much money. It's estimated to produce between 5 million and 20 million, and that doesn't come close to a $240 million gap, number one. Number two, many of the reasons why some of these places are vacant isn't because the landlord's not trying to find a tenant, that they're already struggling as it is. And so for it to just fall in the hands of a receivership or a bank, that doesn't solve the problem. So what we've elected to do, looking at all of the different taxes, an inheritance tax, an estate tax, a capital gains tax. And by the way, if we passed a capital gains tax right now, given what the state recently did, their capital gains tax, we could have one of the highest in the country, probably the highest. And so we looked at the B&O policy, and we said that we're going to come up with a very creative policy where 90% of the businesses actually get a business break. And we're going to look at the top B&O taxpayers and increase the rate such that we can help generate close to $100 million. About $90 million is what we project. In addition to looking at efficiencies in government where we can use all of our talent to be very creative on how we could run unnecessary costs out of city government. So that's our combination that we're doing right now, and we'll have our budget prepared here in the next couple of months.
You mentioned that B&O tax, and there's kind of an interesting attack coming from likely your top challenger, Katie Wilson. She's said that you teamed up with the progressive new member of the city council, Alexis Mercedes Rink, on this B&O idea. And Wilson is accusing you here of being a centrist who's trying to pander to progressive voters right before the election. Like you're a wolf in sheep's clothing when it comes to progressives on this B&O tax. Is that a fair critique? What do you make of what Wilson is saying there?
Yeah. Two things. Number one is, I just don't, it's incorrect. Number one, if you look at my background on a council, I sponsored over 800 bills, some of the most progressive legislation in our city's history. The Race and Social Justice Initiative, banning the box, bias-free policing, creating a human rights legislation to become a human rights city. I'm probably, in terms of being a progressive person, has pushed the envelope on what the city can do. We were actually working on very, parallel tracks because we weren't fully aware of what Councilmember Rink was working on. But the B&O tax increase is something that we have done. We had done a lot of work on. And so when we heard, as I work with the council, that she had something in mind, we said, let's sit down and sort of hash something out. So once again, Ms. Wilson doesn't have the facts, but, why not just say this is good policy? That's what I tell folks. Why impugn someone's motives or I'm in politics. Certainly, there's political angles in everything every politician in this country does. But I'm a person of high integrity. I think this is just good policy. And again, it's going to take more than Alexis to pass it. I have to work with the other council members, and I have a history of working with the council members, regardless of their background, on good policy. That's one reason why city government is working so much better, is because I go to the second floor. When I was on the second floor for 12 years as a city council member, I don't think I ever saw a mayor on the floor, literally. I would see a deputy mayor here or there. I go to the second floor all the time to meet with my colleagues because they are a critical part of the puzzle in terms of being effective in city government. So that criticism is baseless. And again, I just say, why not just say it's good policy?
Let's talk about affordability. Seattle is an expensive city. I'm not telling you anything you don't know. 1 in 4 residents spend more than half of their income on housing. Someone in the Seattle area needs to earn $214,000 a year to afford to buy a house here, according to Zillow. Katie Wilson says your office has not shown the kind of urgency you need to show to tackle affordability. Can you respond to that?
Sure. And once again, Katie and other opponents, they have the luxury of just sitting on the sidelines and being, I guess, advocates or critiques. What we've done, first of all, we have to acknowledge the weight of the rule. No mayor on earth can solve the challenge of some of the issues facing major cities right now in terms of housing. But what we can do is exactly what we will continue to do. We are throwing the kitchen sink at this issue. So when you look at my $343 million housing budget toward housing in a tight budget, you look at the $970 million levy that I helped promote, sell, propose that these voters were gracious enough to realize this is a challenge. When you look at the $1 billion worth of housing investments that we put into the city, you realize this is one of our highest priorities. And in our comp plan, where we developed, where we are preparing for the next 20 years of growth, we're very conscientious that housing is a top priority for every person that's living in the Seattle. So again, we've opened up over 33,000 units, 6,500 of which are affordable, and we'll continue to do that. I'm not sitting on the sidelines. And by the way, I've been doing this kind of work for 20 years. And so when you look at tax policy, housing policy, expediting the permit plans and the design review process to make sure builders could build smartly but efficiently and effectively, significantly cutting red tape. We are doing everything. And when you look at the housing levy, I mean the education levy that I'm proposing, you'll see that we are doubling affordable child care in addition to my tax policy, reducing business expenses through B&O. So the whole package we are doing, we're throwing the kitchen sink at this issue. And we don't have the luxury to just sit here and criticize what's happening to major cities in this country. We are tackling the issue as aggressively as any mayor could do.
On public safety, during your tenure, SPD has added to its ranks. Last year, new hires outpaced separations for the first time since 2019. Your opponents said that there are still problems with the police department, though Joe Mallahan said the culture of SPD was broken. Multiple candidates brought up their concerns about the amount of police overtime that's happening. There are the lawsuits over gender and racial discrimination. And they say that the department isn't making progress towards that goal of hiring more female officers. So is hiring the only metric you're looking at? Is that the best metric to look at for the success of the department? How do you ensure SPD is functioning well?
Yeah. No, that's not the only metric, but it's an important metric that again, in 2020, for example, we were getting about 700 applications a year. Now we're getting over 4,000 applications a year. That is a metrics. When you look at the data in terms of crime rates, just flat out look at it. Homicides down 47%, shootings down 29%, robbery down 15%. This is good work done not just by the police department, but by the care department that we created as well, which again, it responded to over 1,800 events. They responded to 900,000 calls and texts. And so when you look at the whole gambit of public safety, you see that morale is actually where it needs to be. And how do you change morale? Well, you change it by, number one, meeting with people and realizing they are our biggest recruiters. Our police department are helping us with our recruitment efforts. And the chief that we hired, Chief Barnes, and his new leadership team are going to rank and file, meeting with them, realizing that this is our time to show this country what a great police department is. That's why morale is heading in the right direction. When I filed the termination of the consent decree for the judge, we looked at a police department that is showing modeled behavior in terms of use of force. So in my mind, Miss Wilson, who's been one of the critics, helped create the problem by championing the defund police movement. And, of course, she said she wouldn't endorse Shama Swan in her race for Congress, but we know that many people on that side of the political discussion were big proponents of defunding the police, which in effect demoralized them, and it's taken years to reverse that trend. So for them to criticize these efforts now, when we are building up our care department, our park rangers, our community-based organizations like We Deliver Care, that's just misplaced. So we have the data is on our side on creating a great police department, and the people of Seattle certainly deserve it.
One of your opponents in particular is going after your personal conduct. That's Joe Mallahan. And he's created like a whole website that details some of the allegations against you and your office, particularly from your niece, former Deputy Mayor Monisha Harrell. She, in the reporting in KUOW, actually, she's accused your office of being a boys' club where women were sidelined. And I just want to play you a cut of Mallahan and what he told us.
Bruce Harrell is a misogynist. Your own reporting talked about his misogyny with regard to his niece. The fact that he had nicknames for her, and I mean, not nice nicknames, and that his spokesperson confirmed those nicknames and then tried to play it off as just fun. In a professional organization, you don't have nicknames for people that you call them behind their back. That is harassment.
Mayor, what's your response to that characterization of what Joe Mallahan is saying?
Well, first of all, if you look at my administration, particularly my executive team, half of which are women and nearly half of which are people of color, I actually have the lowest turnover rate in 40 years. We went back and looked at that. People actually thoroughly and enjoy working for our administration. Now, I have a background in actually fighting for gender rights, and I've never been accused of this before. I have never had lawsuits filed against me, HR complaints filed against me, so that's a baseless concern. Now, I certainly won't comment on some of the challenges that my former senior deputy mayor, Monisha Harrell, has, who is my niece. I mean, that's that's my niece, and so I don't comment on former employees. But I encourage everyone to talk to our current deputy mayors, talk to people in our office, and they would have a completely different approach. So I think some anonymous people made some concerns or something he's referring to, but that is just a baseless concern. And again, people love working for our administration. This is very, very tough work, and we take all feedback. So, I mean, I met with the executive team yesterday. We constantly check in with one another, see how are we feeling? Do we feel empowered? Do we feel inspired? So that's just not the case. And I don't think I think people want to see a leader that sort of models the behavior. And, I've been in this city my entire life. They've interviewed people I went to high school with and college with and law school and grad school with. And so what you see is what you get with Bruce Harrell. It's always been that case. And people love working for me because I believe in them. And I always, I push them to be the best they could be. But this is tough work. We receive the feedback and we move on.
Just in our final minute here, Mayor, can you give us a closing argument before this August 5th primary for listeners of KUOW and Soundside? Why should they keep you in the mayor's office?
Yeah, my close would be, we just have to remember what we had come out of, number one, in 2022, 2023. The numbers were staggering in terms of tents in parks. Our public safety crime rates were very, very high. It was just not a quality of life here in Seattle that we wanted, and we had to rebuild systems. And I think we've done a great job, a phenomenal job of putting the systems in place. And we have to keep progress moving forward. We have to do that, particularly in light of the Trump administration, what we're facing there. I'm very articulate in the supremacy clause. I'm very articulate in immigrant and refugee rights and what we have to do to protect them from these inhumane raids. I'm very good at reading a budget and looking at efficiencies in government. And most important, I spent a lifetime trying to help others with community-based organizations and the nonprofit communities and those around us. And so I have the endorsements of every living governor, our current governor. I have the endorsements of the Attorney General, Congresswoman Pramila Jayapal, Adam Smith, you name it. I'm the labor candidate, clearly. I have the Martin Luther King Labor Council, SEIU. I could go down the firefighters. They see the momentum that we have. And so I need Seattle to keep this momentum. I'm willing to do it a second term for them. And I humbly ask for their support and vote.
Mayor Bruce Harrell, he's running for re-election. Those ballots are due for the primary August 5th. Mayor Harrell, thank you very much.
Thank you, Libby. Enjoyed talking with you.
I did speak to all of the top 4 fundraising candidates in the Seattle mayor's race. The interviews were all recorded the week of July 14th. And the conversations are available to listen to now on the Soundside podcast. Anywhere you get your podcasts, search for Soundside. Also over at KUOW.org. And you can also check out the Sound Politics podcast feed. That's where we have a full breakdown of the race issue by issue. Thanks for listening to Soundside. And hey, this show is only possible because listeners support us. If you are able to give right now, check out the show notes for a link to donate. And don't forget, you can listen live on KUOW 94.9 FM Seattle at noon and 8 p.m., Monday through Thursday, or anytime online at KUOW.org.